What do good teams do? Good teams win 2 out of 3. And that is what the Orioles did to begin their 2024 season. And we'll recap the final 2 games of the weekend coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, April 1st, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the final 2 games of the Orioles season opening series against the Angels at Oriole Park this weekend. After the O's, a convincing win on opening day on Thursday, getting the day off Friday. They blew out the Angels again on Saturday, but bats went quiet, lost Sunday. Were not able to complete the sweep, but did get 2 out of 3 against Anaheim to open up the season. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from the win Saturday, the 5 things you need to know from the loss on Sunday, and a bunch of Orioles news and notes that came across the timeline over the weekend as well. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers can join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started today. So the Orioles are 2-1 to begin this 2024 season. Yes, we watched them suffer a loss on Sunday. It does hurt. The first loss of the year always hurts, especially with how dominant the Orioles looked in the first 2 games of the year, just blitzing the Angels in those 2 games. And maybe they wasted, 24 runs on those 2 games, only mustered 1 on Sunday. But a series win is a series win, and that's what you're looking for. If you can win every series, you're in a fantastic spot by the end of the season. Of course, the Orioles were very good at not getting swept. That streak continues with the first series of this year, but they get 2 of 3 from the Angels. So we already recapped the opening day game on Thursday's episode of last week. If you haven't checked it out, make sure and go back and check that one on our YouTube page and wherever you listen to the pod. But let's start with Saturday, as the Orioles clinched the series in game number 2 of the season with a 13-4 victory over the Angels in that one. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that Orioles Saturday win. And the first thing you need to know is this Orioles lineup is truly scary. And it is going to be truly scary for a lot of pitchers in Major League Baseball this season. And we got to, of course, point out that incredible inning of the Orioles. One of the better offensive innings I've ever seen from an Orioles team, as they put up 9 runs in the 6th, 9 runs before they even recorded an out to completely put away the Angels in that game on Saturday. And they were aided by 1 error, but otherwise they just continued to pour it on in the bottom of the 6th inning. Things opened up with a Ryan Mountcastle walk. Then you had an O'Hearn single, and the Orioles were just crushing the baseball in this inning. Now, not everything was a hard ball, but pretty much everything in the inning was hit 90 miles per hour or more off the bat. There wasn't any cheapies. O'Hearn singled. Hayes single to bring in a run. Mullins doubles to bring in a run. Westberg singles. Ramon Arias gets a little help from the error. Then Gunnar Henderson mashes a 2-run triple. Adley walks, and Santander just kind of puts the cherry on top with a 3-run home run to right field that just snuck over the small wall to the left of the scoreboard. And it was a 3-1 game going into bottom 6th. I'm thinking, all right, we're going to see the Orioles high leverage relievers for the first time. We might see Craig Kimbrell for the first time. You leave the inning and it's 12-1, and you're looking around like, what just happened? Well, that is what just happened. An unbelievable inning, 1 through 9. I mean, every time this Orioles team puts out a lineup like that, it's just going to be scary for other teams. Once again, for the second straight game, 8 of the Orioles' 9 starters recorded a hit. Unfortunately for Ramon Arias, he was once again the only one in the starting lineup who did not record a hit for the Orioles. But it's just scary to watch these guys do what they do. And so far through 3 games, the scariest guy in that order has been Gunnar Henderson. And the second thing you need to know from Saturday's game is that, yeah, it's early, but Gunnar Henderson has already begun his MVP chase. Gunnar Henderson started the game with a bang, a leadoff solo homer off of Angels starter Griffin Canning, gave the Orioles a 1-0 lead in the bottom of the first inning. It was a 3-2 pitch that actually would have been ball 4. It was well below the strike zone, but it was still in the wheelhouse for Henderson. Hits it 106.6 miles per hour off the bat, 419 feet to right center field, for a solo homer. And in the StatCast tracking era, which goes back about 10, 15 years, it is the third lowest pitch in that era by an Orioles hitter that was hit for a home run. Henderson basically golfing that thing out of there, but his day was not done. Gunnar Henderson came up a double shy of the cycle in this game. He was pinch hit for in the 8th inning by Tony Kemp, who came in for his Orioles debut. And let me just tell you this, Gunnar Henderson just does not care about getting the cycle. We learned that in Oakland last season when Henderson was a single away from the cycle, hit a ball down the right field line. It was a blowout game, could have easily just stopped at first for the cycle. He said, oh, no, I'm going for the better stats. He cruised into second with another double and ended up having a better game. But he also, with his day on Saturday, which was honestly ridiculous what he did to Angels pitching. Henderson goes 3 for 4 with a triple, a homer, a single, and 3 RBIs to go along with 3 runs scored. But he had 4 hard hit balls. And not only that, a hard hit ball is considered a ball 95 miles per hour off the bat or higher in terms of its exit velocity. Henderson's 4 hard hit balls were all 105 miles per hour or more off the bat. And Gunnar Henderson became the first Oriole to hit 4 balls in one game over 105 miles per hour since Ryan Mountcastle did it on June 19th of 2021 at Oriole Park against the Blue Jays. The thing with Mountcastle's game is that is Ryan Mountcastle's one and only 3-homer game of his career. If you remember back to that one about 3 years ago, Mountcastle homered in his first 3 at-bats against Toronto in that one. This one, Henderson didn't have multiple homers, but even more impressive, he's just crushing the ball all around the ballpark. I mentioned the home run. He had a 105 mile per hour line out, had a 110 mile per hour single, and then that triple was 112 off the bat that brought in 2 runs. Just a ridiculous game for Gunnar Henderson and just a ridiculous player. But speaking of Ryan Mountcastle, the third thing you need to know from Saturday's win is that Mountcastle himself shined too. Now, he was certainly outshined by what Gunnar Henderson did, but Ryan Mountcastle also had 4 hard hit balls in this game. He was no slouch in this one, going 2 for 3 with 2 doubles, a walk, and 3 RBIs in this one. Kind of had a home run taken away from him by the big wall out in left field, hit a ball that was 3/4 of the way up that wall for an RBI double that should have been, in the old days, in the game we talked about in 2021, would have been a 2-run homer for Ryan Mountcastle. But otherwise, a big day. Had a 100 mile per hour double, 108 mile per hour double, 98 mile per hour line out, 101 mile per hour sac fly in the game. He's swinging it well. He is really swinging it well through these first 3 games, and that is a great sign for Mountcastle, who was in the lineup every single day, and that's going to be a big thing for this Orioles team. Fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles' 13-4 win over the Angels on Saturday as we turn to the pitching is that Grayson Rodriguez had the Angels hitters in hell with his changeup specifically on Saturday. Heck of a season debut for Grayson Rodriguez. Remember, the last time we'd seen him in a game that counted, it was not good. Got completely roughed up by the Rangers in Game 2 of the ALDS at Camden Yards in October. And he talked about, still having the bad taste in his mouth from that start and wanted to get off on a better foot. He certainly did. Rodriguez goes 6 innings, allowing just 1 run on 4 hits. He struck out 9. He walked 1. And similar to Corbin Burns the game before, gave up 1 run over 6 innings, and that 1 run was a solo homer. It was hit by Taylor Ward in the top of the 4th inning to make it a 3-1 game. But that was really the only blemish against Grayson Rodriguez in this game. There was some hard contact when the fastball was in the middle of the plate, including that home run. But they weren't really missing the fastball. The fastball had good velocity. He's got good extension on that pitch. They weren't really missing it. The Angels were squaring up the fastball a solid amount, but the velocity was good for Grayson Rodriguez, which is really his calling card on his fastball. He doesn't have one of those like invisibles, that rising fastball that a lot of pitchers have that almost feels like it goes up against opposing hitters. Grayson Rodriguez doesn't have that. Induced vertical break on his fastball is about 16 inches, which is kind of closer to average for most pitchers on their fastball. The reason his fastball is good is kind of because of old school velocity. And that's what we saw on Saturday. Fastball averaged 97. He was up to 99 with that 4-seamer. And he also gets really good extension. What that means is he gets down the mound further than a lot of pitchers. For some guys, that's just height. For some guys, that's athleticism and how you throw. And it helps you because the further you get down the mound, the closer to home plate you release the ball, and the tougher it becomes for a hitter to hit it when it's coming out closer to you than it would be maybe for other pitchers that don't get as much extension. But that changeup was the thing that just dazzled on Saturday. 9 swings and misses on 15 swings by Angels hitters just against that changeup. The curveball looked pretty good as well, but the changeup was unbelievable. And what he did to his old pal Aaron Hicks with that changeup, I'm talking about him having the Angels hitters in hell. He had Aaron Hicks in hell. I mean, just multiple strikeouts of Hicks. He was dropping the changeup in for a called strike. Then he'd get it for a swing and a miss. That was the best I'd ever seen Grayson's changeup look. It was truly ridiculous. And then the other thing just to note is, he was mostly fastball, changeup, curveball in this game, but Grayson did throw 7 of his 84 pitches, which were categorized as cutters. Now, last year we saw Grayson with the four-seamer, the changeup, the curveball, the slider, and the cutter. And the cutter was the pitch that really got hit hard when he struggled early last season. And he basically got rid of it in the second half. I mean, he would go maybe throw 1 or 2 or maybe 3 cutters per start in the second half, but he was barely using it. What was interesting is, at least according to StatCast, he did not record a true slider in this start on Saturday, which at times last year was his number 2 most used pitch. And instead it was just kind of a softer version of his cutter. So last year, his slider was at about 83 and his cutter was at about 90 miles an hour. The cutter that he threw 7 times on Saturday averaged about 87 miles an hour. And so it seems like maybe he's doing a hybrid of these 2 pitches, because I think he likes the command of his cutter, but he likes the just movement and overall well-being of his slider more. But he still trusts that cutter for a strike. So maybe he's trying to combine those 2 pitches into one. Pitch didn't have a lot of success, but again, I only threw it 7 times. But that's certainly something to watch for Grayson Rodriguez as we go into his second and third starts and beyond. But overall, a really, really great season debut for Grayson. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from Saturday's win is really the one negative that came out of that game, and that's that Cionel Perez left the game with injury. With the Orioles leading 13-1, Perez came out for his season debut in the top of the 9th just to close the game out and just did not look right. And on his 4th pitch, which ended up being an RBI single, he kind of winced. He held his lower back. He threw one more pitch, a fastball at the top of the zone, and immediately, this is when it's not good. Some players will feel something. They'll walk around. They'll start looking at it. They'll feeling it. And the training staff from the dugout will realize, okay, something's wrong. They'll come out. Perez threw the pitch, grabbed his back again, and immediately waved in the Orioles training staff to come out to the mound. That is not good. Now, it's good self-awareness that something was bothering him, but that's not a good sign when you wave them out immediately. Perez immediately came out of the game, and the Orioles said after the game that it was lower back discomfort and that he would be reevaluated on Sunday. Well, the O's got their answer pretty quickly. And on Sunday morning before the game, Perez was placed on the 15-day injured list with an oblique strain. And that, honestly, is worse than just lower back discomfort. You'll see oblique strains with hitters and with pitchers. It gets to both of them. But the oblique is basically one of those muscles in your core. Everything pretty much that you do in baseball involves those obliques. And when you get an oblique injury, you can talk to former players and people who have had the injury. It sounds like an injury where, oh, you should be back in a couple of weeks. No. It can sometimes take months for players to come back from these oblique injuries, because even if you're feeling healthy doing regular things, you start to do baseball things, swing and pitch, and it'll flare up again because you use your core and your sides so much. And a lot of guys have talked about how painful it can be. Like when you have a really bad oblique injury, it feels like you're being stabbed in the chest. Like, not good stuff. I wouldn't expect this to be a short IL stint for Cionel Perez. It's something we will monitor. Jonathan Heasley was recalled to take his place on the roster, but not a good sign for an Oriole bullpen that was probably its biggest question mark coming into the season already. And Perez, although he was bad in spring training, he was so good in the second half of the season last year for the Orioles pen. He was someone they were going to count on this year. Something to watch, and we'll obviously have it covered if he misses a significant amount of time this season. But the Orioles got the big win on Saturday. Then they turned their attention to Sunday. They were looking for the sweep to open up the season, but those incredible bats that scored them 24 runs in the first 2 games of the year just didn't show up in the Sunday game, as they lost 4-1 and were unable to complete the sweep of the Angels. I'll recap that one, get you the 5 things you need to know from Sunday's loss coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, you know what time of year it is. You know what season it is. We are into the Final Four, and the sports calendar is loaded. And FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet the men's and women's tournament, Major League Baseball, hey, NBA and NHL in the playoff push, and so much more. It's kind of one of the best sports times of the year right now. So visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by LinkedIn. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling is tougher than ever. And that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. It helps you target the right buyers, and that is truly what you need. So right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon and get started. So the Orioles, after winning the first 2 games of this season opening series, had a chance to get the sweep over the Angels on Sunday, but weren't able to get it done, falling to LA 4-1 in the series finale, pushing them to 2-1 on this young season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' Sunday loss. And the first thing you need to know is we just didn't see those same bats, that same deadly lineup in this game. You go from scoring 11 on opening day, 13 in game 2. Orioles had only 1 run on 3 hits in game 3 of the year. That is certainly a different look. Now, they did get on base a little bit. They also drew 5 walks, but only 6 hard hit balls by the Orioles. Adley Rutschman, who went 0 for 4, had 2 of them. He was the only guy on the team who hit a ball hard more than once in this Sunday game. And it just seemed like, hey, the Orioles kind of got all the runs out of there on Thursday and Saturday, unfortunately, and didn't have a whole lot left in the tank for Sunday. Really, the O's had 2 major chances in this game to put some runs on the board. The first one came in the bottom of the second inning. The Orioles had kind of already dug themselves a hole, which we'll get to in a moment. They were trailing 4-0, but they ended up loading up the bases with 2 outs and Gunnar Henderson at the plate. And he did a great job staying patient against Reed Detmers. And on a 3-2 pitch, he took a 3-2 slider down low for ball 4, got the RBI walk, pushed in the run, made it 4-1, got the O's on the board, and brought Adley Rutschman to the plate. And you're thinking, all right, here comes the breakout again. Unfortunately, Adley Rutschman kind of rolled over a curveball, grounded out to third to end the inning. And then the only other chance was really in the 7th for the Orioles. They had gotten into the Angels bullpen, and because of a James McCann single, and then Tony Kemp pinch hitting on a 3-2 pitch, the pitcher Soriano gets called for a pitch clock violation on 3-2, which awards Kemp a walk. So it gives the Orioles first and second 1 out with the top of the lineup coming up. Still a 4-1 game. And you're thinking, all right, Gunner's up. He's going to tie this game right now. Unfortunately, Gunnar grounded into a force out, and then Adley lined out to end the inning. Orioles did not score. And they did get a couple of base runners in the 8th, but erased by double plays and just didn't really have a rally in that inning. But that was about it. It was the 2 big chances in the 2nd and the 7th. They only got 1 run out of them. And that was kind of the difference here. I mean, there was not a run scored in this game after the 2nd inning. Angels got 2 in the 1st, 2 in the 2nd. O's got 1 in the 2nd. That was it. Zeros across the board after that. So the Orioles offense just didn't really show up in this one. Strikeouts, not a gigantic issue in this game, but still a little bit of an issue as they had 9 of them in those 9 innings. But the second thing you do need to know is you got to give credit to Reed Detmers, the lefty who got the start in this one for the Angels. And he was really, really good. Now, he didn't provide a whole lot of depth. He only went 5 innings, but 1 run on 2 hits, 7 Ks, and 3 walks, and only 3 hard hit balls allowed against this Orioles offense. What I was really impressed with Detmers, listen, he is a feast or famine kind of pitcher. Detmers 2 years ago threw a no-hitter. I believe he took a no-hitter into the 8th once last year as well. Like when Detmers is on, he is really, really on and is one of the better left-handed pitchers in baseball. But when he's not on, things really snowball on him. So you really never know what you're going to get from Reed Detmers. The Angels got the good Reed Detmers on Sunday. And I really think what was working for him was that high fastball. He's got a good fastball. It's 94, 95. It's got that kind of, upward action on it where it feels like it's almost rising on a hitter. And he was locating that pitch perfectly. The perfect place to put a pitch like that is right at the top of the zone or just above the zone because it's got good velocity, it's got good rise. So it's really hard for hitters to make contact with. And if they even do, they generally pop it up, foul it back. It's hard to make really solid contact on. But when you're throwing it right at the top of the zone, the Orioles, who are good hitters, who have good plate discipline, they know they can't take that pitch because it's probably a borderline strike. Even if they call it a ball, it's going to be really close. Do I want to take that chance? It might even be a strike itself at the top of the zone. So you got to swing at it. But when he's locating it that well with that much good movement and good velocity, it's very hard to hit. And Detmers just threw that pitch at the top of the zone over and over again to the Orioles right-handed hitters, and they just could not get on top of it. Shout out to Detmers. He had a really good plan, and he executed it on Sunday. Third thing you need to know from the Sunday loss is that Brandon Hyde certainly did prove that he will use his entire bench, even though, and I've talked about it, I don't think the Orioles have their 13 best hitters on the team right now. They've got some more bench-type guys. Brandon Hyde used all 13 position players in this game. We had, the lineup that was mostly loaded with righties against a left-handed starter, which meant Ryan O'Hearn and Colton Cowser were on the bench to begin this game, but Hyde ended up emptying his bench in this game. Colton Cowser pinch hit for Westberg, and then Ramon Arias came in to play defense for him. And we also saw Tony Kemp pinch hit in the 7th. Ryan O'Hearn came in to pinch hit in the 9th in this game. So Hyde, like he did a lot of last year when this Orioles team started getting better and better, he's going to use everybody on this bench. And I know people were disappointed because Colton Cowser didn't start any of these first 3 games, but Cowser did play in all 3 of the games. So that's something you need to know. Like, even if he's not going to start, the Orioles are going to get him onto the field in some way, even if it's just late defensive replacement for Anthony Santander, or it's, lefty starts, then a tough righty comes in. Cowser can replace somebody as a pinch hitter. The O's are going to use this entire bench, and that's why you have all this position player depth, is to use it. And unfortunately, it didn't work out for the Orioles Sunday, but Hyde has trust in all those guys to go ahead and put them out there in the box at any time. Fourth thing you need to know from Sunday's loss as we flip it over to the pitching side, Tyler Wells just kind of looked like Tyler Wells. And I know he gave up 4 runs, and he had a lot of starts that were better than that last year, but only 3 of them were earned, 5 hits, 6 innings, 7 Ks, no walks, and a homer. That's a quality start, 6 innings and 3 earned runs. And this is what you kind of expect from Tyler Wells. Like, he can certainly be better than this, and he has been worse than this as well. But this is your classic Tyler Wells start. He's very efficient, only takes him 82 pitches to get through 6 innings. He gives up some loud contact at times because he's just in the middle of the plate too often. And he gave up 8 hard hit balls. He throws that cutter a little too much, even though it's not his number 1 used pitch. You look at Wells, he threw 82 pitches, 16 of them were cutters. That was his 3rd most used behind the fastball and the changeup. And the cutter was the pitch that got hit very hard at times in this game. Again, too much in the middle of the plate to give up the 2-run homer to Taylor Ward in the 1st inning. Too many cutters up in the zone in the 2nd inning when he gave up 2 more runs. Now, one of them was unearned because James McCann tried to backpick the runner at 3rd. Throw hit the runner, ricocheted into left field, and that scored the 4th run for the Angels. And then, after he kind of gives up some of those runs early, throws too many pitches over the middle of the plate, gives up a home run or 2, he just gets really efficient and settles down. And then he threw 4 consecutive scoreless innings that were honestly pretty easy. Like, he breezed through innings 3 through 6, did Wells, to keep the Orioles in this game. And that's pretty much what he does, what you can expect from him. Sometimes you don't love it, sometimes you do. But I mean, in terms of the swing and miss, like, he did get 16 swings and misses. Now, that's because the Angels were swinging a lot, 46 swings. 16 whiffs is still good. And, all 5 of his pitches got at least 1 whiff on the day. They were good. The fastball was looking good when it was up in the zone. But it's just, Jim Palmer yells at Wells a lot about that cutter. It's not a good pitch. It gets hit hard a lot. I think he's got to throw the slider more. He's got that pitch in his back pocket. He's got the change. I thought the changeup looked great for Wells. I thought the fastball was good up in the zone. He's just got to find that pitch mix and find the edges a little more. He throws a lot of strikes, which is great. He does not walk guys. Didn't walk anyone in this game. But sometimes he's in the middle of the plate a little too much. There's a difference between throwing a lot of strikes and throwing a lot of quality strikes. And sometimes Wells throws a lot of strikes, but not necessarily all quality strikes. And that hurts him because he gives up a lot of home runs. It was basically the quote-unquote Tyler Wells experience, what we got in his first start of the year on Sunday. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 4-1 Sunday loss to the Angels is that I thought the bullpen looked pretty good. The bullpen was kind of the only thing that had been shaky at all in the Orioles' first 2 games, and it was not high-leverage spots, right? It was Dylan Tate with a scoreless 7th, Jacob Webb with a scoreless 8th, and Inyar Cano made his season debut and threw a scoreless 9th, including a disgusting changeup to strike out Mike Trout in the top of the ninth inning. Again, it wasn't high leverage. The Orioles were trailing 4-1 each time these pitchers came in. But I mean, Dylan Tate hit a batter and somehow still threw only 4 pitches in his scoreless seventh, which was very funny. Cano looked good. Webb looked solid. You'll take that from the bullpen. Orioles still haven't used Craig Kimbrell through 3 games, so I can guarantee you, no matter what the score is, he will pitch tonight on Monday night. But otherwise, nice little day for the pen, even though it wasn't super high leverage. But the Orioles, despite not getting the sweep, they get out of there 2 out of 3. And we'll move on to play the Kansas City Royals tonight at Oriole Park. But there was some other Orioles news and notes from the weekend. We are going to get to it all to wrap up the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Amazon Fire TV, which is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick, which is really my personal favorite. You can just plug it into your existing TV. You get access to everything: movies, TV episodes, free and live TV, all the sports you want. Opening weekend for baseball, college basketball tournament. You want a Fire TV, whether it's the NBA, the NHL playoffs, anything going on in the sports world, including the start of the baseball season, Fire TV's got it. And check out the Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked them out, you should. Trust me on this one. So to learn more, visit www.amazon.com/lockedonfiretv. So the Orioles open the year 2 out of 3 from the Los Angeles Angels in the opening series at Oriole Park, but we also got a good amount of news and notes surrounding the Orioles from the weekend. I just wanted to run through them all before we let you go here on a Monday. I wanted to start with the Cionel Perez news. I got to it a little bit earlier. Perez, feeling a little bit of the back discomfort while he was pitching Saturday, gets placed on the 15-day injured list Sunday morning with an oblique strain. That is something you really want to monitor. The obliques can keep you out for a long time. I would imagine it's going to be more than just 15 days out for Cionel Perez. Now, the thought was the Orioles would just recall Nick Vespi again. If you remember, Nick Vespi made the Orioles opening day roster because Jacob Webb, a day before opening day, was placed on the paternity list. He had to fly back home for the birth of his first child. Now, Webb ended up returning on Saturday, was reactivated, actually threw a scoreless inning on Saturday and Sunday. So good for Webb, who was kind of right on that roster bubble. And Nick Vespi was optioned back to AAA when Webb returned. Now, it may have been something because of the travel for Vespi between Norfolk and Baltimore, if he even got there. Whatever it was, they decided not to bring Vespi back. And instead, it was Jonathan Heasley who replaced Cionel Perez on the roster on Sunday. Now, Heasley did not pitch Sunday, so he still has yet to make his Orioles debut. But Heasley, a 27-year-old right-hander who the Orioles acquired in a very minor trade for cash from the Kansas City Royals very early this offseason, didn't really have a good spring, and that kind of put him out of the running to get an opening day roster spot. He had a 7+ ERA in only 15 innings in relief with the Royals last year when he was officially transitioned from a starter to a reliever. He made 21 starts for the Royals in 2022 at a 5.2 ERA. And one was a solid pitching prospect for Kansas City, but he got to the big leagues and just hadn't put it together yet. But I think the Orioles liked his large pitch mix. He's got 5 different pitches that he throws. The fastball is interesting. The sweeper that he started throwing last year is pretty intriguing as well. The Orioles have been working with him. The one good thing Heasley gives you in the bullpen right now is length. So if a game gets away from the O's, whatever it may be, Heasley could throw you easily 2 or 3 innings out of the bullpen right now. And I think that's nice to have. He is definitely the final guy in the Orioles bullpen. He's not going to get any high leverage spots right now, but Heasley is there to be a long reliever, to pitch in a blowout if they have to for the next couple of days. And then really, I think the O's will kind of wait to evaluate, okay, how long will Perez truly be out? If it'll only be like 2 or 3 weeks, maybe Heasley stays. If it's going to be multiple months, I think at some point the O's would send Heasley down and kind of try to make another move to get a higher upside guy into that bullpen. Now, I had mentioned that I thought the O's would make another Danny Coulomb move where they'd claim a pitcher on waivers right before opening day and have him replace Jacob Webb. Apparently, the Orioles just did not find that pitcher on waivers. So instead, Jacob Webb comes back, gets his spot back, Perez gets hurt, and now, at least for now, it is Jonathan Heasley. Now, Heasley came from AAA, where I don't believe he had pitched either of the first 2 games for Norfolk, and that's probably another reason why he was called up, because he was a little bit fresher. But Norfolk started their season on Friday, and it's just a ridiculous lineup, right? I mean, Jackson Holliday, Connor Norby, Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, and Kyle Stowers is the top 5 in that Tides order. They put on a show, 12 runs in each of their first 2 games, did end up losing on Sunday, which we'll get to, but won the first 2 against the Durham Bulls. And of course, what did Jackson Holliday do to lead off the season on Friday? He's facing a left-hander, Montgomery, the Rays' top pitching prospect, a left-hander, so a quality lefty in AAA, and Holliday takes him deep left on left. Thought he wasn't ready to hit lefties. There goes Jackson Holliday. He had hit after hit after hit, as did all the Tides this weekend, which was fun to watch. Now, what was not so fun to watch was what happened in Norfolk on Sunday. The Tides lost to the Durham Bulls 17-5. And the big issue was John Means, who made his first rehab start in AAA Norfolk on Sunday. It did not go well. And you don't want to take too much from the numbers in rehab starts. You want to look more at the data, the velocities, the pitch movement. But when you have the line that he did, you tend to get a little worried anyway. Means went an inning plus. He faced one batter in the second inning, allowed a leadoff single, and came out of the game. But in one inning, he recorded 3 outs. He allowed 7 runs on 6 hits, 2 Ks, 1 walk, and 2 home runs for Means on 32 pitches. It was mostly fastballs. He threw 20 of them. Velocity was down a tiny, not any crazy. It was 90, 91 instead of 92 with the fastball. We didn't see a lot of changeups. Again, you don't want to take too much from rehab starts, especially when it's your first one. So it's basically for John Means like his first spring training start. But you don't love that it's 7 runs in a AAA game. So certainly something to monitor. Means has multiple more AAA rehab starts ahead of him before the Orioles consider bringing him back to the rotation, but not a great start to the year. And if you're thinking about other starting options in AAA, Albert Suarez, who was once the darling in spring training, he pitched the bulk in this game. He threw 5 innings and he allowed 6 runs on 7 hits. So, not a great day to be pitching for the Norfolk Tides on Sunday. And then the last thing really notes-wise is we got an answer on the 3 players that the Orioles had DFA'd to make their final roster cuts for opening day. Nick Maton, Ryan McKenna, and Tyler Nevin all did not make the roster once the Orioles signed Tony Kemp to get that final roster spot. And all those guys were out of options, so all 3 were designated for assignment. And my prediction came true. Nick Maton and Ryan McKenna both cleared waivers, so both of them will stay in the organization and will be sent to AAA Norfolk. Now, neither will be on the roster, but Maton I can't see coming to the bigs. McKenna, I would think if there's an injury to an Orioles outfielder for a couple of weeks, McKenna probably just becomes the guy that would call up for 2 weeks just because he can run, he can play all 3 outfield positions. The Orioles know him well. We'll probably see him in Baltimore again at some point this year. Can't get rid of Ryan McKenna. But as I predicted, Tyler Nevin was the one of the 3 who was actually claimed on waivers. And he was claimed pretty quickly because right at the top of the waiver order is the Oakland Athletics. And it was the Athletics who were awarded Nevin on a waiver claim. It's actually kind of funny. He might be taking a roster spot or at least taking playing time from Daryl Hernandez over in Oakland with that claim. But hopefully Tyler Nevin gets a good amount of playing time for a really bad Oakland team and he can kind of figure it out at the big league level. Happy for him because he's going to get much more regular at-bats in Oakland, but that's kind of how the roster shakeup went down for the Orioles. But that'll do it for today's episode. Of course, we are Monday through Friday here on the podcast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. And of course, wherever you listen, a 5-star rating and a review would be very, very helpful as well. I will be back tomorrow. We've got baseball to talk about. The Orioles start their second series of the year. It is the Kansas City Royals who come into town. Royals went 1-2 over the weekend against the Minnesota Twins. Dean Kramer makes his season debut tonight against the veteran Michael Wacha. And remember about Wacha, he is a right-hander, but because of his changeup, he's got reverse splits. He is much better against lefties. So we may not see all the lefties in the order for the Orioles tonight. I'll be back tomorrow to recap game number 4 of the season. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Team every day.